joined us. Thank you so much for joining another webinar from the Ability series. Today, we'll be talking about helping children with academic difficulties. We'll be discussing the key strategies to adopt in the classroom and at home with Madam Geetha Gopi. Like I already mentioned, she is a rehabilitation practitioner, psychologist, and also a consultant special educator. But more about her a little later. Let me give you all a quick introduction about Ability before we begin. For us as an organization, all carers of children with special needs are at the center of our universe. Our mission is to give every child an opportunity to thrive. Our mission is to make things easier for the carers of children with special needs. How we do that? We make resources more accessible, affordable, and effective for everyone through technology and, of course, collaboration with caregivers like you all. We bring a host of other systems such as community and other resources so that none of us have to do this alone. Everyone should be given the chance to enable the best possible, or I would say everyone should be given the opportunity to enable the best possible chance of discovering their child's true potential. If you don't already know, Ability's resource platform is something that you should definitely check out. Click on the resources tab over here, and you can find a range of exclusive resources curated by the experts from the Ability community and also the team members of Ability. So if you want to help your children with special needs, this is the place you go to first to find out helpful materials. Of course, you can go to our other places, such as our YouTube channel, which has over hundreds of useful videos of the past sessions conducted by Ability, and also to stay updated and posted about the upcoming events, tools, and offerings from Ability. What you need to do is you need to follow our Facebook page. The link of both of these things, our YouTube channel and also our Facebook page, is being shared in the chat box right now. You might want to check it out immediately if you want to stay posted about Ability. Apart from that, this is our events page, which you can visit app.ability.com/events to stay posted about all the upcoming or scheduled workshops or webinars from Ability. Also, this page has a list of all our past webinars and workshops under the on-demand sessions. So you might want to check it out, register for it, and listen from the experts around the world. How you can access all these different workshops and webinars? Simple. You need to create an Ability account, of course, if you don't already have one. If you already have one, the life is pretty sorted because you need to simply log into your Ability account, and for any workshop, webinar, or session that you want to create, you just need to click on this orange color CTA button. Whether you want to register for a workshop or a webinar, clicking on this button would do. Also, to have easy access to all the workshops from Ability, what you can do is go for Ability membership. You can either take a yearly subscription, a quarterly subscription, or a monthly subscription. When you try and register for any of the workshops, you are also being presented with an option to go for Ability memberships. Ability membership will give you access to 6 or more workshops, and of course, all the on-demand sessions from Ability. Do check it out if you haven't already. And while I was mentioning about webinars and workshops, the link for our upcoming webinar is also being shared in the chat box. You might want to register for that. And the next workshop from Madam Geetha Gopi, if you do wish to register for that, that is also being shared in the chat box by our team members. So do register if you are interested and take the Ability membership for easier convenience and easier access to future sessions. Now, without delaying it any further, let us come to today's session. Like I already mentioned, this will be conducted by Madam Geetha Gopi. She is Director of Professional Development and Programs at the Sashaktikaran Trust, Cochin, with over 30 years of experience in helping children with special needs. She has worked in international schools following an American curriculum for inclusive settings, primarily for more than 15 years. She has also done some intensive work in curriculum development and adaptations, behavioral management, coordinating and promoting best educational practices using UDL principles among staff and parents. She has also launched an early academic series, which is a teacher's kit for teaching early English language skills and basic mathematics based on universal design of learning. We are truly, truly grateful to have you here with us yet again, Madam Geetha. So thank you so much for joining us. And our listeners are very eager to listen from you. So without much wasting time, I would request you to take over.
Good evening. I'm really happy to be back with the Ability Group and the Ability community of participants. So thank you for this opportunity. I think we'll get started without wasting much time. I'll just go into sharing the screen. Today's webinar is about how to help children who have academic difficulties, some general tips, general strategies, what are the causative factors of academic skills, etc. And,
Yeah.
what are the skills and processes that are required for achieving basic academics. So when we talk about
Madam
academic
Geetha,
learning, yes,
may I interrupt you for a second?
yeah,
Could
sure.
you switch to the full screen mode so that the slides are better viewable to all our users out there?
Is it okay now?
Yeah, maybe from the view menu and full screen.
Is it full screen now?
Yeah, it is manageable now. I've just great. Maybe let's go ahead. Let's not delay the session.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
okay. So, receptive language, academic learning involves certain key areas, which is one of which is receptive language. That is being able to listen, to comprehend, to understand what is being taught, to follow directions and respond accordingly. So, a lot of receptive language skills are very important for any kind of academic learning to take place. We also, once you receive the information has to be processed. So the information has to be processed, and whatever we receive is sent to the brain. It is processed there, and then after that, the response, whatever we have to respond to, it takes place. So processing of language involves things such as reading skills, thinking skills, comprehending what is being heard or read, and integrating different ideas and concepts into understanding what the speaker was saying. So, processing of language again involves all these skills, which again is part of academic skills. Expressive language includes writing, that is being able to express or communicate what one's own ideas and thoughts into writing, or in the form of speaking, so giving oral answers, or by doing, that is by performing. For example, if the teacher has asked the child to show something, the child can draw and show, or can actually use the body gestures and show it. So expressive language, again, the expressive language skills are very important for acquiring, maintaining, and performing academic skills. Apart from these three, which are very language oriented, another key area is math skills, that is math concepts, math computations or calculations, which are based on the number system, the basic operations of addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, other mathematical concepts such as time, money, being able to estimate, etc. So that is another key area. Subject content mastery, other subjects other than language and math, the other subjects that come into the school system, school curriculum, which includes concepts and skills that are related to science, social sciences, economics, etc., art, physical education. All these things come under subject content mastery. So academic learning is a confluence, or is a sum total of all these things acting together in a certain harmonious fashion. For children to acquire, to move through their school curriculum. Primarily, when we look at children having academic difficulties, we see roughly about, most of the studies say about 5 to 15% of the student population have some form of academic difficulty or the other. And the commonly seen issues in the classroom are, they may have difficulty in acquiring specific skills that are required for reading, for comprehending what they have read, for writing, both whether it is handwriting or even expressive writing, that is forming their creative writing to express their ideas. Math, and of course, as I mentioned earlier, subject content matter. So difficulty in acquiring skills related to all these areas, or maybe one area. It depends on child to child. So there, in any of these areas, children may have difficulties. Difficulty with the thinking process and learning strategies. In the thinking process, it involves cognitive processes such as, putting things in order, thinking in a sequential fashion, what came first, what came next, and so on. Or if instructions have to be given, or math skills, problems have to be performed, things like putting things in step form, like what to do first, what to do next. So following a certain logical order, being able to reason out, all these are part of thinking and learning strategies. So many of these cognitive processes, these children may have difficulties with, and which again may affect them acquiring the related academic skills. Because of difficulty in thinking process, learning strategies, and therefore their acquisition of academic skills being affected, many of them also display low motivation, particularly when it comes to academic learning. And this low motivation may be because of the difficulties they face, and because of not getting the right kind of supports to overcome or to circumvent those difficulties. Prevalence of academic challenges among children. Uh, Prevalence of academic challenges, as reported by UNICEF, is that a great amount of, almost 53% of children from low and middle income groups from developing countries are learning poor. Learning poor means they are unable to acquire the right kind of reading and comprehension skills by the end of primary school. And a lot of children, if you look at the screen, you can see that many of them fail to attain basic academic skills, that is functional literacy and functional numeracy. Many of them also fail to, therefore, if they have trouble with attaining foundational literacy and numeracy, they may fail to attain basic secondary level academic skills as well, which is like in middle school, high school. Obviously, if the primary skills are deficient or not on par with others as expected of grade levels, then definitely in the secondary level, they're bound to have difficulties.
Madam Geetha,
Yes?
just a few of our audience members were reporting that they are facing some difficulty hearing you. Can you try and speak a little louder
Yeah, sure,
for
sure.
making it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so sorry.
Okay. And apart from, although with regard to academic issues, we've talked about literacy issues, that is learning to read, write, comprehend. Numeracy issues, that is concepts, difficulty in acquiring concepts related to math and all the skills that go with math concepts, subject content mastery. But apart from all these, the other things that I talked about, the cognitive processes, the learning strategies, these are all dependent upon, academic related issues, which are commonly seen in children who have difficulties with academics. And some of them, or the most prominent of them, include having attention deficits, being inattentive in class, daydreaming, hyperactivity, that is unable to sit at a task and complete tasks on time, shifting focus from activities very frequently. There could be memory issues, which is very low retention of what is being learned. So some of the children, even if you've taught them something right then, 5 minutes later they may have forgotten, or sometimes they may have learnt it for the time being, but say a day later or 2 days later or maybe a week later, they would have forgotten. So memory issues, being unable to retain and recall what they have learned over a period of time, that is another related issue. Poor language abilities, that is, if they have trouble with receptive and expressive language, or any one or both, definitely most of our academic learning takes place via some medium of instruction, which is language based. So that adds to the problem. If they have communication issues or language issues, if they have things related to language, such as mispronunciations, not being able to follow through directions, especially more than one step directions, being unable to, retain directions that they've listened to and then act upon it, especially if there are multi-step directions, being unable to or having difficulties with vocabulary, a very limited or poor vocabulary. All these language related skills and abilities, if they are deficient or poor in these children, definitely they have an adverse effect in acquiring academic skills. Apart from these, there are also behavior issues. Again, many of these are very closely linked, and one may lead to the other, or they may occur concurrently. So other behavior issues, such as being unable to self-restrain themselves, especially with children who have hyperactivity, for example. They're very impulsive, so they may have self-control or self-restraint issues. They may quickly react in a particular situation, and all these kind of behaviors in a classroom can create problems. They may get into fights with other children. Social skills, social interaction with other children or peer group may be affected. So all these ultimately also have an effect on their academic learning, because a lot of times children with behavioral issues are usually punished, or they're given time out, and such kind of strategies are resorted to by teachers, and therefore many of them tend to miss out on academic learning, or the time and spent within the classroom to learn academics. Sensory issues, some of the children may also display sensory issues, particularly those children who have, who are on the autism spectrum. Many of them have an overreaction or an underreaction to certain kind of stimuli, usually visual and auditory stimuli. Sometimes, lights, noises in the class. Typically, in a school environment is quite often pretty noisy. So all these things can cause, these children to get disturbed and distracted. And if they have strong sensory issues, definitely they find it very difficult to stay within the classroom, to stay calm and controlled in the classroom, and respond to, and acquire academic skills. So therefore all these kind of skills are very closely linked to the academic learning that goes on in the school environment. Apart from this, some of the children may also have motor coordination difficulties. There are conditions like cerebral palsy or developmental coordination disorder, DCD, where children may have fine motor or gross motor or both coordination difficulties. Therefore, they're unable to do the academic tasks that the other children of their peer group are performing in class. And therefore all these this also motor coordination difficulties may also affect their expressive language, being able to produce sounds, words, being able to speak with clarity, etc. So these kind of issues also affect academics and academic learning. uh, all these all these or some of these may be present in different different amounts or different varying degrees in different children. Sometimes you already have a child who has had a diagnostic condition, that is a special needs condition or an established disability. So if you have children who already have come through a proper formal diagnosis and has a condition that that is causing the academic acquisition delay or difficulty, definitely these are also a special needs established condition is also a reason or a cause for academic acquiring academics in a smooth and efficient manner. Some of the risk factors or possible causes of why these kind of conditions occur. Broadly, we can say prenatal, which is difficulties that occurs during the pregnancy period of the mother when the mother is carrying the child. Sometimes they are genetic; they may be inherited. There are a lot of studies nowadays where certain conditions seem to be inherited. Um, a difficult pregnancy, if the mother has had physical or emotional trauma or other illnesses like hypertension or high diabetes, etc., many of these or severe infections, these kind of difficult pregnancy issues can also be possible risk factors to having children who may be born with some kind of neurodevelopmental difficulties. And this ultimately may would also have a problem in acquiring academics when they enter school. Prematurity, when we've talked about prenatal causes. Now natal causes. Natal causes is during birth, or some babies are born premature, that is they are not yet ready to be born, they haven't fully developed. So many of these children may be very vulnerable, very prone to infections. They're in utero, or the development within the uterus may not have been completed, but they have been born before that. So therefore, certain there might be certain kinds of delays in their neurodevelopmental milestones, and this can also affect academic learning later on. Difficult labor and childbirth. So during birth, if the labor has been prolonged or it had to be induced, and if the childbirth had, the child had, there was fetal distress because of prolonged labor, etc. All these can be possible risk factors to developing some kind of neurodevelopmental issues, which may ultimately have a have an adverse effect in later on academic learning. During birth, also lack of oxygen, which is anoxia, or hypoxia, which is reduction of oxygen, which is usually denoted by a delayed birth cry. If while taking case history, if the parents do tell you there was delayed birth cry, that is also a possible risk factor, because again, a lot of brain damage could occur because of lack of oxygen, or not enough getting not enough supply of oxygen during birth. Birth trauma, again, while being born, sometimes some children, the presentation may be the fetal presentation may not come as required. So there may be something called breech presentation, where the instead of the head coming out, the legs come out, or the fetus may sometimes not be in the correct position while being delivered. So all these can cause damage, cell damage, and primarily brain cell damage, and therefore neurodevelopmental issues, which lead to later on academic difficulties may be seen. Postnatally, there could be trauma, or things like head injury, great emotional trauma, such as death of a very close relative like a parent, etc., or even things like we hear about a lot of trauma happening in war zones in children who come from very disadvantaged backgrounds, etc. That can also cause permanent damage, where they may have difficulties in acquiring academics later on. Another postnatal, a condition that we do see does may cause academic issues is epilepsy, that is convulsions or fits, as is commonly called. Each time there is a fit, it is assumed there is some kind of damage that is happening, so that can definitely affect cognitive processes. Severe infections which affect the brain, such as encephalitis or meningitis, mumps, measles, rubella, etc., which ultimately, if they affect the brain, definitely the cognition and cognitive processes are affected, and this can lead to um, academic difficulties later on. Environmental, causes such as toxins in the air, high pollution, lead poisoning, even things like extensive use of pesticides. So consumption of food which is grown with excessive use of pesticides. All these kind of environmental factors are also possible risk factors. Now, how does these academic difficulties manifest? Basically, in a very common sense approach, if you look at it, they have significantly greater difficulty in learning as compared to other children of the same age. So, they're either they do not learn as easily or as smoothly as their peer group. They may have an established disability or a special needs condition, and many of these have already been covered in a lot of ability webinars: specific learning disorders, ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, intellectual disability, autism spectrum disorder, cerebral palsy, hearing impairment, vision impairment. Sometimes there are combinations of multiple disabilities. One disability may occur with another. So all these compounds the academic difficulties. They also cause a lack of low self-esteem and lack of participation in class. So because they have difficulty learning on par with their peer group, this causes a feeling of learned helplessness, and many of them have are not confident enough, so they either try to shy away from taking active participation in classroom activities. They either withdraw. Sometimes they withdraw a lot. Sometimes they act out so that they would be punished, or they can get out of that activity which was more stressful. And many of them, because of the conditions or the difficulties and challenges they face, they require supportive education and related services to help them cope with these kind of issues. So what do we do when they do have these kind of issues, and when we encounter the children who have such difficulties in the classroom? What do we have to do is we have to reach out to all of them. Reaching out to all of them within the classroom is a very daunting, challenging task. Educators have to be constantly be thinking out of the box, and trying to work towards planning, how can they include and how can they provide for children with special needs or other kind of related academic difficulties. And what does this involve? As educators, we need to provide more stimulating learning environments, which will take into account different kinds of learners. So each child learns differently. Some there are different learning modalities that they employ while learning. Some of them are strong visual learners, some auditory, some of them are kinesthetic or tactile learners. So if try and understand your students and reach out to different kinds of learners. So provide a learning environment that will help reach out to all kinds of diversities within the classroom. Triggering and refining the learning process in students. So if you don't just focus on teaching academic content, rather work on the processes that are required to learn that content. For example, if the child has to read a particular story, the child requires certain skills, such as certain phonetic decoding skills or recognition of certain kinds of sight words to enable the child to read that story. So work on those skills, work on those phonics skills, or work on those sight word skills before you actually get into the story. So working on the learning process, the that is very important before you even if you are teaching something like math. Before you even start on addition, you need to know whether the child how to go about doing it, what is addition, going through the process, going through understanding the different kinds of methods that are used. So all these cognitive processes have to be worked on while you're teaching academic content. So being aware of the skills and processes is important so that you can trigger that, you can think of ways to trigger that and refine that in the students. Overhauling your own teaching process through improved teaching strategies. Now, this is a never ending process for all educators. If, as educators, you want to stay relevant, if you want to reach out to diversities in your classroom, you need to be constantly be on the lookout for new ideas, new strategies, discuss with your colleagues, look up the internet for ideas. So, overhaul your own teaching process by using better and more improved teaching strategies instead of following the same things that you've been using several years ago. So, work on your own professional development so it improves the quality of teaching you provide in the classroom. Providing remedial intervention and related support
Madam
services
Geetha?
for the children. Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
Swati?
There are again requests being received to increase the volume of your voice. So
Okay.
sorry to keep
Yeah, no
interrupting
issues,
you.
no issues. I am trying. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Providing remedial intervention and related support services. So if there are children who are falling behind and they have gaps in their learning, or if you know they have a special needs issue and established disability, and they need remedial intervention to fill in those gaps in learning or to provide extra supportive services which will plug in those learning gaps to help them reach to grade level, then definitely making provisions for remedial intervention and also related support services. Some of the children who do display academic difficulties may have other conditions such as speech and language issues or motor coordination issues, epilepsy or medical issues, so on. So if they need related support services from either the therapeutics or medical professionals, or if they need counseling and guidance from psychologists, so provide those kind of related support services, because getting them this kind of help will ultimately help them become better learners, and it will definitely reflect in their academic learning and their performance in the classroom. And last but not the least, despite all this, there will still be children who require additional support systems, which are called accommodations and modifications. So accommodations and modifications are when you try and change the content, that is called the content of the curriculum to suit the level of the child, that's called modification. If you are trying to retain the same content as a peer group but trying to change methodologies, the processes, the activities, the materials that you use, or even things such as reduction of work, etc., those come under accommodations, where you're not changing the content but you're making other kind of adaptations to help the child cope with the academic learning. So when we are moving towards, as educators, when we are moving towards improved teaching or learning strategies, what are the things that we need to focus on? I've already mentioned this, but I'm reiterating that. That is, we have to focus on skills and processes. A lot of times, educators focus on the academic content and not on the skills and processes. So, focus on the skills and processes. As I said, if a particular problem is being solved, don't just tell them how to solve it, but also how do you get to that? How did you arrive at that? Giving all those, for example, if I talk about doing fill in the blanks activity, which is a very common academic activity, activity that is done. How to go about doing that fill in the blanks, how to scan the word bank that is given, how to read the sentence and try out the different words in the word bank and see if it fits with the sentence, with the coherence or the meaning of the sentence, whether it makes sense. That is the skill and process used in doing a simple fill in the blanks activity. And many of these children do not have these skills or have difficulties in these kind of skills. So these kind of skills and processes have to be explicitly taught, like how to go about doing something, and not just the academic information that is imparted. So that is very, very important. Providing diverse kinds of learning experiences. Again, different children have different learning styles. Many of them learn through different modalities. Some of them may have a strong visual modality, which means they learn more by seeing or through visuals or pictures or charts and diagrams and so on. Some of them may be very strong auditory learners. They learn better through listening, through music and such things. There may be others who may be kinesthetic or tactile learners. So they learn better through touch, through feeling, through doing, through hands-on activities. So provide diverse kind of learning experiences for every kind of concept that you're taking. A simple way of doing this is, include whatever concept you're teaching, include an oral component. So there's a speaking and listening part of it, a performance component where there's a hands-on activity, and then a reading writing task related to that. So the paper pencil activity also takes place. So if you are doing all these three with almost every concept that you teach, if you think and plan accordingly, by and large you'll be able to reach out to a lot of diverse kind of learners in the classroom. Use appropriate learning activities, aids, and tools. Again, learning activities should be connected with the themes or the topics you're teaching. Use appropriate aids, learning aids or teaching aids. If a child is having difficulty, say, counting on fingers, then provide, counters, actual tangible counters, which they can handle. So, using the right kind of aids and tools are necessary. Teaching the children also what tools to use when, that is also very important. So, if a child is having trouble with, say, remembering the phonics, the alphabet phonics sounds while decoding a word, then train them to look at the alphabet poster you put up in the classroom. So that is a visual tool for the child to remind in case they've forgotten or they can't immediately recollect the sound of the alphabet. They can look at the alphabet poster and the picture that goes with it and recollect. So these are the kinds of learning aids and tools that we need to have in the classroom so that it enhances their learning. Using a backward design approach, which is assessment, teaching, and lesson planning. I know normally we say plan the lesson, teach, and then do the assessment. But using a backward design approach is the latest trend, and it helps. When I say assessment, I'm not talking about actual test or the exams. I'm talking about what are the skills that we are looking for by the end of the unit or by the end of the topic or the chapter. So if after a certain chapter, we are looking at, say, after reading a certain story in English, we are expecting the child to recognize all the at family words, or we are expecting the child to recognize the sight words, he, look, at, the. Okay, I'm just giving an example. Some sight words, some phonetic words. And we are going to expect the child to understand what is a sentence, what is a complete sentence. So if these are the skills that we are going to assess at the end of the lesson, then that should inform what are we going to teach. So basically look at the skills and processes that you're going to assess at the end of the chapter or at the end of the learning unit. So understand those skills and processes, and that should inform what you're going to teach in the classroom. And once you decide on that, that will inform what you're going to plan in your lessons, what activities, what materials, what resources, how you should set up your classroom, with whether you need to have different learning centers with different kinds of activities set up, and so on. So use a backward design approach, because if you know what you're going to look for or what the children should be capable of uh, by the end of the teaching unit, that will help you to understand what you should teach and how you should go about planning your lessons and activities. So backward design approach really helps. And in many of our curricula nowadays, there are explicitly stated that by the end of the lesson, the student will be able to, and then they give a list of skills that the children should be able to do. So that should be your focus. It doesn't matter whether you use the textbook prescribed, or whether you use the exact story, or you may use the story just as one of the resources from the textbook, but you may use other activities to supplement. Ultimately, what is required is the children should be able to perform those skills. So it doesn't matter what resources you use. What matters is whether the children acquire those skills by the end of the teaching unit or the lesson. So how do we engage the student? What are the effective learning teaching strategies that we can employ? First is engaging the learner. And engaging the learner is, if you have to get an active participation from the children, they need to be motivated. They need to show an interest in the happenings of the classroom, and they need to be able to not just sit and listen to you or pretend listening to you, but should be able to respond, should be able to perform as required, or as you take them through the lesson. So active participation and enhanced motivation happens only when you engage the learner. And how do we engage the learner? Again, as I said, these are all very interconnected. If you use different kinds of activities, if you use diverse kind of learning experiences, if you use oral performance as well as paper pencil tasks, and you alternate between these, definitely many of these children, the children will get more engaged, they will be more motivated to participate, etc. If you take use multisensorial learning, the VAKT approach, which many of the educators have talked about, the visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and tactile. So when you say multisensory learning, use a lot of visuals, use use songs, movement, rhythm, uh, kinesthetic and tactile. You can use physical movement, dance, games, etc. So many of these things, these kind of varied activities which promote multisensory learning, definitely helps and aids in better academic acquisition. Um, and how you connect them. I mean, what is important, what is the creativity of an educator lies in how you can connect whatever concepts you're teaching into different kinds of activities. Add on a functional and or application component to your academic concepts. A lot of times children end up forgetting or not learning, or showing not showing enough motivation to learn. It's because they don't see the utility of what they're learning. So being able to apply them in real life situations should be focused on as well. Sometimes within the confines of a classroom, it may be a bit difficult. You can have simulated situations though, but you can even add on those as additional home activities. For example, if you're teaching numbers, you can ask the children to go home and collect things with which connect to different numbers. If you're teaching the number 5 for that week, ask them to collect different objects which amount to 5, and so on. Adding a functional or an application component definitely helps, because they get to perform it in the real life situation. Even something as simple as when they're climbing steps, count as they climb. Or if they're learning skip counting, skip count and climb the stairs. So these kind of things makes it fun. uh, Also, you can add on have simulated situations in the classroom, where you can set up shop, for example, and have objects that have a little simulated shopping experience, where the addition or subtraction you're teaching can relate to an actual shopping experience, simulated shopping experience. So the utility of using the academic skills in a functional or a real life environment, or a simulated real life environment, helps, because then the learning becomes more meaningful. So when it becomes more meaningful, children are more motivated to learn. They're more prone to remembering them as well over time. So, general tips for educators and parents. First thing is, seek information about your child. Know your child. Take the initiative to know your student, know your child. Understand them, understand the ways they learn best, understand what motivates them, what are their likes and dislikes. And if they have challenges or a special needs condition or a disability, accept the fact that they have this and they need support systems to help them circumvent that. And also accept the fact that sometimes, some of these conditions are not reversible. So even with remediation and training, you can improve them to a large extent, but still some remnants of the challenges would still remain, and they may continue to need different kinds of supports, different levels of supports throughout life. So understanding that, accepting that, and then moving forward will really help. Accepting responsibility, again, not just on the part of educators but also on the part of parents. Accepting a joint responsibility towards improving the child, and towards contributing towards the child's better development, skill development. Providing emotional, educational, and social support unconditionally. So sometimes we may have very difficult kids in the classroom, but despite that, they still need support. So you have to look at the fact that even if they are difficult, what is it that their needs are? Why is it that they are presenting such challenging behaviors? So try and understand that and provide the right kind of support without being judgmental. Treat students as individuals. They also have their own rights and responsibilities, and treat them not just as subjects who need to be taught and trained, but they are also their own individuals. Give them a voice in your classroom. Let students know you're interested in them. Even if the child is not probably performing on par, give them a chance to be successful. Ask them, show interest in them. Even if they're not able to answer, you can ask them to think about it, go over to the other children, and then come back to them. So that shows the child that you have not ignored them, but you are actually considering them as an important contributing member in the classroom. Employ active listening when the children speak to you. You know, Again, even if you pretend to listen, children are very smart to catch on. They may not actually they may catch on cues, gestures that or even from the body language of educators that and parents, that you're not listening to them, even if you pretend you're listening to them. So employ active listening. Give them a ear when they're saying things. Try and understand what they're trying to communicate to you, because understanding them will also help you to provide better support for them. And as I said earlier, avoid judging or moralizing what they're doing. Instead, try and understand why is it that whatever learning challenges or behavior challenges they are presenting in the classroom or at home is why is it happening. So getting to the why of those things and trying to understand, is there a better way you can support them to overcome those challenges, that would really help. Identifying the strengths and talents in your children and helping to promote that, using those strengths and talents to even using that to acquire or plan your academic activities, because you're more likely to reach out to students through their strengths and talents. If you have supportive services or resource room in schools, portray it in a positive manner, not in a negative manner. Instead of saying, okay, if you don't do this, you'll be sent to the resource room or to the supportive services. Instead of that, give say that I know you're having difficulties in the resource room or in the remedial supports room. So portraying that space, the special ed setting, in a positive manner really helps in both the children, the parent, and the other peer group in accepting and seeing the supportive and remedial services in a more positive manner. Promoting acceptance, again, not just with the parent or with the educator, but also the classroom environment. Um, Stop branding or labeling the child as being slow, lazy, or incompetent. Instead, provide more positive comments about his or her work and their behavior. For example, if you find a child who is being very distracted and is off task, instead of reprimanding the child, you can just say, I see you're not busy, can you please get busy onto your work. Please get busy. Even something as small as that. If somebody is standing up when they're not supposed to, instead of saying don't stand up, you can say please sit down. So that's again a more positive way of giving addressing the issue. So again, if you find they're agitated or they're frustrated and they're squirming in their seat, you can go up to them and ask them, is there something I can do to help you? Even showing that kind of empathy will elicit a much better response from the children. Encourage positive behavior and academic output. By doing all these, definitely you will be encouraging positive behavior and academic output. And last but not the least, show patience. As educators, as parents, a lot of times parents come to us and say, okay, my child is in such and such a class, but they are performing, 2 grade levels below or 1 grade level below. And then they say, okay, how much time do you think the child will take to catch up? Now, we need to understand remedial sessions or supportive services, special needs, special education services are not magic wands. They take time. We work in very systematic fashion to bring out the best in every child. So a lot of patience is required, to counsel the parents, the child also, that it doesn't matter, step by step you will learn, you will get there eventually. May take some time, but eventually we'll get there. So showing that kind of patience and conveying that to parents also is very important. So parents also, you need to realize that if the child has been in school for 3-4 years and still is struggling with the basics, then definitely you cannot expect a remedial educator or special educator or the therapist to put together everything within say 3 months or 6 months. It will never happen. So show patience and stick with the program to improve uh, the potential of your child and to to move towards more academic success. So that brings us to an end of this webinar. Thank you very much. I'm open to questions and answers now.
Thank you so much, Geetha ji, for such an amazing and informative session. Yet again, people are being grateful to you for sharing such a whole lot of useful advices. So a lot of people are asking and have questions related to remedial maths and how to teach kids with difficulties who are facing difficulties in learning maths. To them, I would like to inform that we have our workshops planned for remedial maths as well as remedial English. So if you are interested in learning about these topics in greater detail, do join us for the upcoming workshops. These will be conducted by Madam Geetha Gopi herself, and I am sure that you will have ample opportunities to learn from her and also directly interact with her via those workshops. The links for registering for the upcoming workshops will also be shared in the chat box, so do keep an eye there. And now let us quickly begin with our Q&A session. Before I begin with the Q&A session, I would also like to remind that we have our next webinar scheduled on 20th of April. This webinar will talk in great detail about speech and language development. So if you are interested in this topic, please find the link to register in the chat box and do register. This will again be a free session conducted by a speaker from Singapore, and I am sure you will have pretty valuable lessons to learn from her as well. So do register. And now let's move on to the questions. So we have received a lot of questions, Geetha ji, but like always, we will ask the most common ones. And although some of these questions I believe you have partly answered during your session already, but I'll still go ahead and answer, I'll still go ahead and ask them so that you can answer that one more time in greater detail and our listeners could benefit from it. The first one is how to develop interest for learning in children when they seem disinterested completely. This has been asked by Nazra, Josephine, Soma, Kajli, and so many others.
As I already mentioned this in the webinar, engage the student is very important, and this is why you need to know your students well. Understand what interests them. What are their, so for example, if a child is interested in football, you could start the topic with the football, something related to football, and then bring it to your academics. I've had students who love animals a lot. So even if I'm doing math lessons or English lessons, I try and relate it to something. I do it something related to animals. So sometimes I just start off with, okay, let's draw your favorite animal, and then start off a math lesson with that. Do your addition and subtraction using different kinds of animals, or write sentences using different kinds of animals, and so on. So find what is appealing to the child, and use those as starters, and that will actually help. And a lot of times, as I said, if you provide different kinds of multifarious activities rather than just worksheets or just paper pencil activities, then definitely you will find they'll be interested in either in one thing, if not in all of them. Every child won't be interested in all that. Every child would be some may be more interested in, say, the music part of it. Some children may be more interested in the drawing or the games part of it. But whatever part they're interested in, at least the major learning will take place in that part, but they will get introduced to the other kinds of learning as well. So the stronger modality of learning would be used to acquire, but the other learning modalities will still be stimulated. So as they grow, as they go from one grade level to the other, introducing different kinds of learning experiences will definitely help to keep them engaged. A lot of times when we go from one worksheet to another worksheet and so on, that's when children lose interest. So plan accordingly. And if if the child has attention issues, now that is another common factor why they get disinterested after a while. If they have a very short attention span, and if your activity is long, then they have difficulties. So it is, if you know your student well, you can plan accordingly. So if there are students who have attention issues, then plan for shorter activities. Or if it's a long activity, break them up into installments, or do it part by part. So if it's a long activity, you can just say, for example, you're doing an art activity, you're doing a lesson on shapes, for example, and they have to draw a circle from a given cutout or template. Then they have to cut it and paste it in their book. Now for a child with ADHD, this will be too long. So you can do it in parts. The first initially the child can just draw it, and then you can give a break or do other things and then come back to that activity later on, and then ask the child to cut it out. Or you can even do the drawing part in the classroom and ask the child to take it back home as a homework and do the cutting part of it and bring it, stick it and bring it back to the next day. So you have to learn how to pace your activities depending on the children. So if you provide various kinds of activities, take into account the nuances every child has, then you will learn how to engage your learners more effectively. It is
Definitely.
an
Then I
art.
have another. Sorry. Did I interrupt you, Ma'am Geetha? Sorry.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So, like you were just answering, I have another related question from Khadija. Khadija is asking if the activities that you were talking about, or if you play around with boards or certain colorful things, do these things at times distract them? Too many colors on the boards or something like that. Can that make it happen?
Yes, overstimulation is also a problem. So therefore, you have to, even when you put up displays in your classroom, you have to uh, put up displays only that will be used interactively. If you're not using it just as decorative pieces, it's better not to. If you know certain children have difficulties with these things, what you can have is you can have a little corner in your classroom where you do these activities so that it's not all throughout the classroom. I know a lot of teachers do think that putting up a lot of stuffs on their walls or hanging a lot of displays actually help, but sometimes it is counterproductive. In fact, especially with the younger children, because they get distracted with a lot of things. So whatever you're putting up, make sure whatever you put up is something that you use with the children every day.
Got it.
Otherwise, what happens is they end up being more distracting. And try and use more, depends on the colors you use. Usually I find, a lot of fluorescent colors or, things like that, neon kind of colors, really overstimulate many of these children. So it's better to use more solid colors while you're doing things. And again, limit the number of colors if it is not necessary. Sometimes you find, for example, if we are talking about word flashcards, limit your word flashcards to maybe 3 or 4 colors instead of having too many colors, which actually destroy. It doesn't give a good. Rather than the word being focused upon, the color would be focused upon. So try and use more
Right.
sober colors. Try and use more solid colors. That helps. And
Using
always do
sober.
not put up unnecessary displays.
Right, right. So I hope you got your answer, Shadija. Using sober, solid colors and choosing minimal colors might help. The next question that we have, I'm running a little fast because we have less of time left on the clock. The next question that we have is from Anupma. Anupma is asking, how can we deal with children who or students who are daydreaming or have concentration issues? Anupma is watching us live from Facebook, and that's how she has sent us her question.
Uh, Daydreaming, see, this is part of inattentiveness. So again, when you find children are doing that, obviously whatever you're doing is not reaching out to the child. The child is simply not getting engaged. This happens even in a classroom. Suppose, after lunch sessions, for example, in the afternoon, if you start a lecturing lesson or a writing lesson, you'll find the children are not very responsive. So in those situations, it will be better to probably get them to do some activity. Stand up, move your arms, move your hands. Think of ways to stick to the same academic skill, but do it in a way where the child cannot just sit and daydream. The child has to be part of it. So use things like, that's why I said use things like games, Sometimes even just standing up or doing little activities would, even where they're sitting right at their, the seats itself, they can just stand up and, even move around. Sometimes I just tell them, okay, I'll ask a question, and before you answer, just take a round, and then just take a round around your chair, and then answer me. So each one does that. Use more movement oriented activities. And if you give long stretches of the same activity, yes, children tend to be inattentive.
Sure.
Sometimes even a
Hope that
change of place helps. If sometimes when you ask them to sit there, I've done things like that, where sitting on the chair, they're just not paying any attention. So I ask them to come forward. I usually give them a small placemat or something at the on the floor, and I ask them to sit on the floor and listen. And just that change of place and that movement sometimes helps. So, think of ways of what works with the child.
sure. The next question that we have is from Carmel. So, Carmel is asking, this has been a prominent question for a while now. And Carmel is asking, how can we help children learning through online mediums? And also, how can we, I will club this with another question from Margie. How can we particularly help those children learning online who have retention issues or who have low retention? So, how can we answer both of these questions from Carmel and Margie? Over to you.
Children with academic difficulties, well, we educators are also having academic difficulties now coping with online teaching and online learning. It is not an ideal situation, I can say that. With some children, it seems to work very well. Especially, I've seen children who are on the autism spectrum. Some of them seem to respond very well through the online learning, whereas many of the others do have difficulties. Usually, what we do is we ask a sibling or a parent to be there beside them if possible, so that they can help the child focus. Also depends on what you're giving through online. If you're just going to lecture through online, that is not going to engage the student again. So you can show, you can intersperse your lectures through videos or animations or pictures and so on, and that will help. And even when you're showing this, elicit responses from the students, not just have a one-sided interaction. Instead, pose questions to the children, get them to answer. You ask them to look at whatever visual you put up online, etc. That will help. Another thing is, give them activities which probably they can do at home related to what you've taught them in the classroom. So, I usually say things like, if we've learned about, say, the at words and phonics, I ask them to look through, walk around their homes, or, look through their storybooks and look through magazines, find any object that that ends with the at word, for example, or find pictures of words that end with the at word, or draw pictures that find words with which end with at, and draw pictures to go with it. So the next day, that could be the activity. Instead of teaching again, when you're going through a review, the children could present their part of it. What was the word they found that had the at ended with the at family word, and they could show their picture and talk about it. So again, when you're doing that, you're actually getting them uh, to demonstrate their learning. So that also builds up better student engagement, that also builds up better retention. Getting the
Sure.
children to talk about
Hope
what
that,
they have learned.
right. Hope that answers your question, Margie and Carmel. Since we are running short of time, I will take one last question for today's session. So, this question is from Deep Gambhir. Deep is asking us how to handle a child's tantrum. For example, when we ask them to study and when they really don't want to, the child starts shouting, fighting, and doing all sorts of things. In this particular case scenario, what can we do?
First of all, you have to first find out why this is happening. Is there an actual learning problem, or is it just a behavior issue? A lot of times we find children who find acquiring academics difficult. They have learning processing issues. That is when many of them do not have an interest in academics. So therefore, they try to get out of it. It's just like getting out of a stressful situation. But having said that, we know that we cannot let them, get away with it. So initially, as I said, plan different kinds of activities which will engage the student. That will be of some help. The other thing is, try and promote more positive behavior by giving points or stars, or something like that, if the child sits and focuses on for the activity. And again, vary your activity. And for such children who have a low motivation, do not give a long activity at one go. So even if the activity is long, as I said, break it up, give breaks. You don't have to totally divert from the topic as well. You can talk about it, or you can explain it, you can ask them to think about, okay, what we have learned, and if they can bring in better behavior. Normally what I do is, before an
Madam
session,
Geeta, I would like to interrupt you
I
there.
used
I
to
think so
tell
there's some network
and after
troubles.
each activity, I usually give a smiley with it. Can you hear me now?
Right, right. Yeah, there seemed to be some network issues. We couldn't hear the last two, three lines that you said. Uh, do you want to repeat? Or if not, I think so she's facing some network challenges. If you want to hear more from her and in fact get answers to your questions in much greater detail, you can join us for the upcoming workshops which will be conducted by her, where she will answer these questions in much more greater detail. The links for the upcoming workshops are being shared in the chat box right now. And since we are running short of time, I would call this the end of the session. Thank you so much, Madam Geeta, for being such an amazing and inspiring speaker, like always, and for sharing from the immense amount of knowledge and experience that you have. I'm sure all the listeners and attendees attending this session today must have benefited from this session. Thank you so much for joining us today. You are on
Thank
mute.
you.
But okay, thank you everyone. If you wish to attend the next webinar from Ability, do register. The link for the next webinar is also being shared in the chat box right now. And do not forget to share your feedback about today's session. This will help us improve the experience further for you all. The next webinar would be about speech and language development, and I'm sure it would interest a lot of you.
Thank you, Ability, and I'm sorry about that audio, mishap.
No worries. Would you want to repeat the last part of the answer now that I think so you have a stable connection before
Yeah,
we call this session an end?
yeah. I was speaking about engaging the student, right? If Yeah.
Yes, yes, you were.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned in the webinar itself, when you use different kinds of activities, provide support systems that will help. Positive behavior management is very important for children to get them into doing what you want them to do. So normally I do things like, if I plan 5 activities, I write down those down. I communicate that to the child at the beginning of the session. And then after each activity is over, I put a tick mark, or give a smiley face, or give a some kind of a positive encouragement to the child, so that the child is motivated to go on to the next one. Again, if they have an attention issue, I usually give them a break and I tell them, okay, we can do a coloring thing, or we can talk. uh, you know Again, it's just a 2 minute or 3 minute break, and then go on to the second one on the session, what I've mentioned. So initially maybe all five the child may not do. The child may be doing just two out of the five you've planned, but then slowly you shape it up. It takes time, but we normally find it happens. And then what I normally do is, after each, in between each activity, I give some kind of a break or a reinforcement or a deviation. But towards the end, say if I have planned five activities, towards the end, the fourth and fifth activity will be usually something the child likes doing, like say play ball, or do a jigsaw puzzle, or listen to music. So they know that only if they do the other three or four, they will get to the fifth one. So, keeping that as a motivator also helps.
Great. Thank you so much for completing the answer, Madam Geeta. Thank you so much once again for an amazing session. That brings us to the end of today's webinar.
Thank you. Thank you to all the participants for the lovely questions as well.